Hello everybody, how are you doing? Welcome back to Improve Your Python. This is number 4. Just check that the sound is working on my phone here, and then we'll get coding. Hello. Yeah, it is working. Good. Always like to check. Hi everybody. We are going to be improving your Python today again. We're going to just do, first of all, a little program that puts all together everything that we did in the last lesson. So we looked at truthy and falsy. We looked at, what did we look at? Oh yeah, in, and we looked at, just look at my notes here. We looked at not in, and looking for blank, and we did the range checks as well. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to, I'm going to just load up the editor that I'm going to use today, and then I'll transition it in a moment. So open up your preferred IDE. I'm going to use the Raspberry Pi one again because it's just quite a nice neat one in the browser, and we'll get going once it actually loads up. Yep, there we go. Okay, and there we go. Okay, so we're just going to put together everything that we did last lesson and practice it, because we didn't really do I mean, I went over what everything was, but we didn't put it together in something kind of a program, if you know what I mean. So it's all very well to do examples of things, but I like to then apply it to sort of scenarios that might be sort of real scenarios. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a little function that's going to help someone log in. So actually, to start with, actually we won't do a function. We'll just write the code, but we can add it as a function later. So copy along the code with me, and let's start. So it's just going to be a login. Sorry, I'm using the wrong one. I've got a new keyboard attached, and I'm just trying to work out where the hashtag button is. Okay, I have to do it in my other one. So we're going to do a login program. Okay, login program. And in that login program, we're going to get the user to enter their username and password, because if you're logging into anything, you need to enter your username and password. So let's do that. Let's do username. You could do user underscore name, but I'm just going to do username. And then we're going to get them to input that and get them to enter, to give them a prompt, enter your username. And then we're going to do the same thing for the password, and I'm just going to call it password, my variable that's going to capture their password. So nice, easy, straightforward, 2 different inputs. And obviously you can test that out if you want to, but obviously it won't do anything because we haven't written any more code yet. But that's fine, that worked. Good, nice to see some more people improving their Python. Hello. Oh, by the way, actually, what you can do is, you don't have to do this, so you could just do a little splash thing as well. Don't have to, but yeah, just put login. There we go. That looks a little bit neater. If I am going too fast at any point, just say. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do, once we've done that, is we're going to actually have a list of banned users. So we're just going to use this later on. So I'm going to create an array, and I'm going to have a list of banned users. So using an array name for it, or I should say list, And we've got admin. I mean, you can create your own root and test. So it's a list or array of usernames, banned users that we don't want to have, admin, root and test. And we're going to use this later on in our if statement. And again, I'm just going to quickly run it just to check that it is, yeah, good, no errors there, excellent. Now, when we're using our login screen, the first thing that you should always check when they're entering a user or a password is that they haven't entered something blank. So that goes kind of without saying, but we need to make sure that we check it. So the first thing we're going to check is that there's no blank entries. Hopefully it's not so tippy-tappy with my typing. I've got a different keyboard now. You might be able to just hear it slightly, but I have got a separate keyboard from my laptop, so it shouldn't be so clunky. So we're going to check for empty fields, check for empty fields in the input data. And basically we're going to check truthy falsy. We're going to use truthy falsy. Remember, the truthy falsy is checking to see if something's blank or empty, and it's false if it's not empty, and it's true if it is empty. So we're just going to say if not username or not password. So basically they have values in them, or they don't have values in them, sorry. If one of them or the other is blank, then we're going to print both fields are required. Now in a moment what we're going to do, actually if I do this, there we go, I've just entered blank for both. Just pressed enter, don't enter anything. It's caught that and it said both fields are required. Now at the moment all it's just going to do is print to say what's wrong when we log in, but later on what we'll do is we'll turn this into a function. So a function is a piece of code that returns something, and we can use that later on. But to start with, I just want to concentrate on using this. We will do a big thing on functions and procedures, but there's lots of stuff we can learn as we go along. So you can test it as well, actually, with some values. So if I enter something for one of them, but not the other, both fields are required. So testing is always really important with every if statement. So I can put nothing in that one and then something on the password. That's worked. And then if I try it again and I just enter something with both, then yeah, that's fine. So with this, always, yeah, we're testing the OR. Check to see this side of the OR is working and check to see this side of the OR is working, and your testing is done. So testing every single line of code, vitally important. Always, always test. Now our next check is going to be using comparison chaining or a range check. So we're going to check the username length, and it needs to be, well, using comparison chaining. And again, we're going to use the if not this time. So if not, and then we're going to open brackets. Using brackets is quite helpful for this because we've got the comparison chaining and it helps the not stand out. So we've got 3. So we need at least 3 characters. But what are we testing? We're testing the username. So remember, in the middle goes what the variable that you're comparing, and then on the outside goes the upper and the lower boundary. So in this case, it's got to be not less than 3 and not greater than 20. So we can see the variable that you're, or the value that you're comparing goes in the middle, and the lower goes on the left, upper goes on the right. And then again, if they haven't done this correctly, then we're just going to put print. I'm going to give them a prompt to say print username must be between 3 and 20 characters. So we're using len again, and len is obviously, it's the same one that we use if we're using a for loop to get the length of an array. Exactly the same sort of thing. It's the same function, but you can use len on an array and it tells you how many items are in an array, or you can use it on a string because a string is just an array of characters. So it's doing the same thing. And then we're going to test that again. This time we're going to enter a username with 2 characters. I'll just pick 2 random characters. And my password, doesn't matter what that is. Username must be between, 3, missed my 3 out there, 3 and 20 characters. Let's try that again. Run. Yeah, perfect. So now I'm going to test it again to make sure that I've got enough characters. That's worked. So always check that it runs properly. And then, so, you know, if you enter the right number of characters, and then I'm going to enter more than 20. And yeah, username must be between 3 and 20 characters. So I've tested the lower boundary, tested the upper boundary, and I've tested to check that it works if it's in between 3 and 20. And actually another good check that you can do if you've got a boundary check is check 3 and 20. So if I've got like 3 here, is that going to pass? Yes, because it's 3. Because it was 3 less than or equal to. So that's fine. Okay, so I'm just going to pause there again. And then we'll do our next check. We're going to use in. Okay, so next then we're going to check, or we're going to use in. And one of the things we can do is make sure that when they've used the username that, or they've typed in the username, that there's no spaces in the username. So again, let's add a new if statement, and we're just going to check for spaces in the username. So we're basically just going to do if, and then we have a quote, but we're going to put a space in between that quote because we're looking for that particular character, because the space is still a character. It's got an ASCII value or a Unicode value. If there's a space in the username, then what do we put in the print? Username cannot contain spaces. So just make sure that you do have a space in between those quotes, because otherwise you're checking for blank, and we've already checked for blank. We're checking for the character that is a space bar. And then we're going to test it again. Yours works great, excellent. Yeah, keep testing, everybody. Keep testing, always important. I know I keep saying it, but I'm going to keep repeating it. So let's test this. So in my username, I'm going to say Bob. I'll just put Bob. Can't think of anything else. And password, username cannot contain spaces. So I'll test it again, but without a space, and it should work. Yeah, perfect, good. So again, I'm always testing with an if statement. What happens if it's true? What happens if it's false in that check? Our condition, it's called actually, a condition. Always check to see if it's true, always check to see if it's false. Now we can use some of these as well in the password too. But I mean, regarding passwords, you know, you can sort of you can ban certain things in passwords. I don't know if you've signed up for certain sort of websites and things or apps. Usually what I do is I use my Apple keychain and it generates a password for me, but some insist that you have an uppercase, a lowercase, that you have a special character, but then they have a list of only certain special characters, etc. in your password, which can be a bit annoying. So yeah, we can use these in password as well, but we're just doing it as a login this time. So now we're going to go back to our list of banned users here. And with our list of banned users, I mean, this is a sort of thing that you could load in from a text file or a database that can be dynamic. So you might, for example, have people who are on your system and you've banned them, and you can load in a list of real banned people with their usernames, and you know, it could be hundreds long and it's kept in a database. But in this case, we're just obviously using a list or array, and we're going to check to see, is the username in that list of banned people? So we're going to say, we're going to check the username is not banned. So do you want to try and do this? So see if you can try and do this yourself. Do an if statement to check if username, all lowercase, is in the list of banned users. If you can't remember how to do the lowercase, just leave that for now. But I want you to try this one yourself. Okay, so just give you another minute. I am still here. And then I'll put the answer up on the screen. Okay, so we're just going to use in, just like we did on the one above, but this time we're going to say if username, and then I'm going to do dot lower. Don't worry if you didn't do the dot lower, that's fine. The main thing is you did this next bit, in banned users, i.e. it's a banned user. Then we're going to print this username is not allowed. So I'm going to test this, and I'm going to put, for example, username admin, username is not allowed. I mean, we could even put in as well, if you wanted to, in here, we could put our fprint, we could say username, and then just put the F on there, and it will then print out that that username is not allowed. So going back to the first lesson that we did with print, admin username is not allowed. So in, really helpful if you've got arrays. You could do the same for banned passwords as well. So you could, in fact, we'll add that later on, but you know, there is some very basic passwords I mean, there's probably thousands of them, but things like password as a password, let me in, that type of thing, you could have as a banned password as well. But we're not setting that up at the moment, so that's more helpful if you're setting everything up. This is logging in rather than setting it up. So the next thing that we're going to do then is we're just going to check the password length as well. So we had done this one here to check to see if the username length is correct. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to get you to do the same thing, but for the password. So your task is to do comparison chain, check the password length, is, and this time you can have more than, you know, is between, I mean, normally 8 is the minimum really, is between 8, and we probably don't want to go any higher than, like, I don't know, I mean, we'll say 30, but that's probably a little bit excessive. But anyway, what I want you to do is write the code based on this one here, is to check the password length is between 8 and 30. So write that code now. Just give you another minute. Okay, so I mean, you can just copy and paste it really. I'm going to do that. And all we have to do is change, instead of username, it's password here. And then it needs to be between 8 and 30. So I'll just put 8 here in my comment and 30. And then we just need to change the if statement here to be 8 and here to be 30. So let's test that. We'll just put a username in that's not too long, so that passes. And then the password, we could just have like 2 characters or 3 or 4. Press enter. Username must be between 8 and 20 characters. Oh, sorry, that says username. Sorry, I need to change that one to password. Password. That's the only problem if you copy and paste, you do things like that, and I'm like, so let's try that again. So username's okay, and password is like 2 characters. So password must be between 8 and 30 characters. So I'm going to test it to be between 8 and 30 characters. So that's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that should be fine. Yeah, that's worked. And then I'm going to do one that's above 30. So don't know how many that is, but that's very, very long. password must be between 8 and 30 characters. Perfect. Okay, so we've got a lot of different checks there. We could do some more ones on the password, but we're not going to. We're just going to leave that for now. Now, this code's fine. You know, it works and it checks certain criteria that we've set. But really, the best way to use this sort of program is to have it in a function. Because what we can do is we can return true or false as to whether or not the username and password are correct. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this, or we're going to turn this into a function. So what I want you to do is go right to the top of the code, not the first one here, and we're going to type in def login, open close brackets, and then a colon. So just add that line in here. We're going to call it login. And it should go above that print there, right at the top. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to select all of the code underneath that def, but not the def. So just going to select all of it with the mouse right to the end there. So it's all selected, but not line 3. And then we're going to press the tab key, and what that is going to do is indent it. So I'm going to press the tab key once, and that will indent it. And what that does is it says all of this code is now in this function. And actually, if I run this, nothing will appear. Does anybody know why nothing appears now? Who can tell me why nothing appears and runs now? I haven't called it. Yeah, exactly. I haven't called it. When we create a function like this, we use def. Def means define. And that means we've defined that function, but we haven't called it. So what we need to do is we need to go down and we need to call the function. So we do it flush to the left-hand side and we just call login, open close brackets. Don't forget the open close brackets. And now when we run it, it will actually run and call the function. Now, just do that, make sure you've got that working and it will work as before. But there is a couple of things that we can do to just make this a little bit better, because actually technically at the moment it's a procedure because it doesn't return anything. But this is a classic sort of piece of code that we should be using a return value. So we're going to add that in a moment. But just call it, make sure it runs okay again. And we're just going to add a couple of more lines, or a few more lines of code basically, into our if statements. So what we're going to add in is every time that our if statement fails, and we've put print both fields required, print username is between 3 and 20, we're actually going to just put in a return false afterwards. And that is basically going to say the login has failed. So we're going to return false under every if statement after the print, return false, capital F. Return false. Can't type today. Return false. Return false. And return false. And what that will do is it will basically, it won't even test. So if, for example, what this does is, if the username is not, or the password are blank, it will just pull out of the function completely. Return false says don't even bother running any more code, just go back to who called you. Because if they've got one thing wrong, there's literally no point in checking anything else. Because if they haven't got a username or password that aren't blank, there's no point in checking if the length is between 3 and 20, or if there's a blank in it. It's just pointless. You're just wasting time. So one of the important things about code is that you don't run code that you don't need to. And so by returning false, we're just saying stop now, go back. So let's test that. Let's test that if we put blank username password, that it doesn't do anything else. Both fields are required. It hasn't checked to see if it's between 3 and 20, if it's in the username, that it's got a space there. You just don't need to. It just says both fields are required and quits out. And it will then just go down to this line of code here, or whatever is next here. There's no line of codes left. So this is a really good way to speed up your code. Make sure that you don't run code that you don't need to. So just test that now. I mean, I could test another way. I could test, this time I'll have non-blank, but I will have the length of the username will be above 20. So I enter that, enter my password. Username must be between 3 and 20 characters, but it hasn't checked anything else. In fact, a good way to test that is to have the username above 20 characters, but with spaces in it. So if there's a space in it, and then add a password, and it's just checked that it's between 3 and 20. So it did this comparison, and then it returned false. It didn't check to see if there's a space, because there's no point. They've already failed on this part here. Has all your code tested okay with that? Good, excellent, good, glad it works. Good, good. Okay, so that is a nice little program. What you can actually do, one other thing that we could do is if they get to the bottom here in our function, let me just here. So after the last if, we're still inside the function here, we can just put a little print to say print username welcome. Or actually, sorry, F welcome username. That's a better way to do it. There we go. So it will only run this line of code, welcome to whoever you are, if all of the other checks have passed. So let's do that. Let's check that that works. I'll add a username, Bob, or whatever it is, and then a password. And it says welcome, Bob, because it's passed all the tests. It would never get to line 37 if any of those previous tests were run, because we're returning false and quitting the whole function before we get to that print. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful to actually get some real context for the use of these things. We are going to continue with if next week and look at some new things. So we won't be doing, we'll be using everything we learn week by week. We will be kind of on the sly incorporating into future things, but we're going to be looking at if statements and how not to have too many sort of nested ifs, how to get rid of redundant things in your ifs as well. So see you next week, and have a good week, everybody.